All right, a new biography offers an unprecedented look at the life of one of America's most influential women. Barbara Bush is the only woman in U.S. history to advise both a husband and son during their presidencies. She remained one of America's most admired women, despite being largely out of the public eye for years before her death in 2018. Her life and role in American history are chronicled in The Matriarch, Barbara Bush and the Making of an American Dynasty. The book is written by USA Today Washington Bureau Chief Susan Page. She interviewed Mrs. Bush 5 times in the final 6 months of her life and is one of only 2 people outside the family ever granted access to her personal diaries. Susan, good morning.
Good morning.
Oh my gosh, and it shows because
Bravo.
This is so richly researched and so many new details. I know you talked to so many people, over 100 people, right?
That's right.
And you asked them if George Bush hadn't been married to Barbara Pierce, would he have become president? And what was the conclusion you came to?
Such a generational divide. People who were in the Bush's generation generally said, yes, he would have become president regardless. But the younger you got, the more astonishing people thought the question was, because they were such partners. And the word that people kept using was indispensable, that they were each indispensable to the other. I asked actually each of the Bushes separately that question. And Barbara Bush said immediately, absolutely, he was destined to do all the things that he did. And I asked George Bush, and he thought about it for a minute, and he said, yes, I think I would have become president.
That surprised me that he answered that way.
Really? But you know, I think they are both wrong about that, because I think this was a partnership, the likes of which we rarely see in life.
Let's go through, because there's so many interesting details. You open up in one of the opening chapters about the death of Barbara's first daughter, Robin, who died of leukemia at the age of 3 years old. Why did you start the book with that story?
You know, I didn't originally. In the first draft of this book, I had it where it fell chronologically, and the first chapter was on the 1988 election, the election that put George H.W. Bush in the White House. And I realized that it was all wrong, that that was not the defining event of her life, that the defining event of her life, or one of the most defining events, was the death of Robin. And it shaped so many of her views going forward. It shaped, for one thing, their own relationship, because she was the strong one during Robin's illness. He was a strong one in the aftermath of their illness. That was a pattern that they repeated through decades that followed. For another thing, even when you came to things like her activism on AIDS, that related to what she saw, the stigma surrounding kids with leukemia when her daughter was suffering.
It was also interesting to see the dynamic of Barbara Bush and her mom, how her mother really affected her. Because you're right that her mom was a little mean to her, and certainly seemed to favor the other daughter, who she considered prettier and smarter than Barbara Bush. How that must have affected her.
Well, her mother would often make comments about her weight. And Barbara Bush was, in fact, sensitive about her weight for the rest of her life. And in reading her diaries, often the first thing she noticed about a woman she met was whether she was slender or not. So clearly this was something on her mind. And, you know, it's a signature of hers that she would make fun of herself, make fun of her weight. And I think in part there was just a germ of truth there, that she thought she wasn't pretty, although she was, in fact, a very handsome woman.
You know, when you think about that, you think about her tough, but yet she had so many vulnerabilities. Her daughter Robin dies in 1953, am I right?
That's right.
But then she reveals that in the 1970s, she suffered through a great bout of depression where she was suicidal. Did you talk to her about that?
I did, and this was something that the only person she confided in was her husband. They had come back from China. He had taken over being head of the CIA. All of a sudden, she had been such an integral part of his life, and now he could not share the CIA secrets with her because, as she said, she couldn't keep a secret. She was also going through menopause, and there may have been other factors as well. And she told me that she would find herself so depressed that she wanted to kill herself, that she thought about plowing her car into a tree or into the path of an oncoming car, and that she would have to pull off the road and wait for that impulse to pass. Now, after about 6 months, this depression lifted. One thing she did was go volunteer in a hospice, and that she thinks that was helpful in her getting through this. She says now she told me that she felt she should have gone to a doctor, she should have gotten treatment. There's treatment for depression, and that she would urge other people to. But you know, it affected how she felt about people who suffered from depression, because she didn't seem judgmental about it, because she understood in her own life.
She understood the pain
what
of
it had been.
But how did she connect that? Did she connect that with the role that women were supposed to play in the generation she came from, and then in the emerging one? Because there was a kind of stoicism you were supposed to maintain, which undoubtedly must have made the depression worse.
That's right. And you know, one thing that happened during this depression is, to a small degree, she questioned the choices she had made in life. You know, this was a time with the rise of feminism. Women had all kinds of options and opportunities that they hadn't had when she was growing up. And she wondered if her life had real meaning, if she had made a big difference. And one of her sons, Neil, told me that he couldn't believe that she felt that way, that they talked about it once. He couldn't believe she felt that way given all that she had done.
Wow.
It's really, it's juicy. Yeah. It's juicy and it's so smart. And you really give us some insight into who Barbara Bush was. I look at her very differently now, the things that we just really didn't know about her.
Right,
Susan.
you talk
well
about
done.
her views on abortion rights, a woman named Jennifer Fitzgerald who may have had some sort of relationship with her husband. There's, as you point out, there are just so many things in this
She and
book.
Nancy Reagan.
And Nancy
Not
Reagan,
good.
And
they
an
did not
amazing
get
period
along.
in American history too, and to see it through her life is really great.
And even the story behind wearing red, there's a story behind that. And what did she want the book to be called? She didn't like the Matriarch.
She didn't like the Matriarch.
Yeah.
She didn't like the word dynasty. I said at the end of our first interview, so what would you call the book? And she
Yeah, I like
said,
this.
The Fat Lady Sings Again.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you went with the Matriarch. Barbara Bush and the Making of American Dynasty. Bravo, well done, Susan Page.
Susan, really good.
Congrats to you. The name of the book, I'll tell you one more time. You might have a mention again? The Matriarch. Barbara Bush, The Making of American Dynasty. Goes on sale tomorrow wherever you like to buy your books.